Well, good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is Moretti, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., and we're supported by a coalition of transportation organizations who support our work in providing the latest information on the condition and use and performances of our transportation system. The format today is that after I give our comments, or give my comments, we'll hear from Chris Runyon. Chris Runyon is the president of the Ohio Contractors Association. And then after those comments, we'll open it up for questions. Carolyn Kelly, my colleague, is also on the call. And at that point, either through the raised hand function, if you can indicate that you have a question, or through the chat function, and then Carolyn will elevate you to the panel so that you can interact with us in terms of questions or any follow-up questions you have. The report we're releasing today, Keeping Ohio Mobile, is based on analysis of information that we requested from the Ohio Department of Transportation, and then the latest data from a variety of federal sources, and also other transportation analysts, including Texas A&M University, that does a lot of work looking at reliability on our highway system. The key findings of the report is that Ohio continues to show progress in moving forward with critical projects across the state to improve the condition, reliability, and safety of the system. And we saw in 2019, when the state legislature and the governor raised the state's gas tax, that over this decade of 2020 to 2030 is going to provide an additional $5.4 billion for the improvement of the transportation system in Ohio. We also saw in 2021, with the passage of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a boost of 30% in federal funding for highway and transit coming into Ohio. So that has allowed the state to move forward with significant projects. But at the same time, looking into the future, the significant challenges include a significant increase in highway construction cost inflation. And as we see vehicle efficiency standards increasing, and also the increased use of electric vehicles, both of those are going to reduce the effectiveness of fuel taxes. And so those are long-time challenges in terms of state and federal funding moving forward. The report includes a list of $1.4 billion in critical projects that the Ohio Department of Transportation are moving forward with over the next 3 years, and they're broken down regionally. And these are critical projects that are going to improve the reliability of the state's roads and public transit systems, and also improve the safety on these systems. We're really entering a time where we've moved beyond COVID. In Ohio, from 2019 to 2022, after the initial shock of COVID and a significant drop of travel, during that period, we saw vehicle travel drop by 2%. But through the first 3 quarters of 2023, vehicle travel in Ohio has increased by 2%. So we've returned in Ohio back to the level of pre-COVID, when Ohio had some very heavily traveled roads and highways, and we're seeing that level of travel has returned. Moving forward, the Ohio Department of Transportation has identified $1.6 billion in critically needed highway and transit projects throughout the state, including the state's largest urban areas, that while the funding is in place for initial engineering, at this point, the funding is not in place for actual construction of these needed projects. Moving forward with these, one of the significant challenges will be the significant inflation of highway construction costs. The Federal Highway Administration monitors highway construction costs in terms of labor and also materials. And since the beginning of 2022 through the first 9 months of 2023, the rate of inflation was 36%. So unfortunately, that inflation has really taken a bite out of the increased state and federal money. In terms of the condition of the system, the report relies on the latest data available looking at pavement conditions. And this is not just for state maintained, but also for locally maintained major roadways and highways. The TRIP report finds that 31% of pavements on major roadways in the state are in poor or mediocre condition. And we estimate that driving on rough roads, which results in more stress on vehicles, which results in vehicles not lasting as long as you would like, and also increasing the need for repairs and even fuel consumption. We estimate the cost of driving on these rough roads in Ohio is $4.2 billion. I'll go ahead and break that down for each of the state's largest urban areas. In the Cincinnati area, 33% of major roads in the state are in the region are in poor condition, and 22% are in mediocre condition, which is costing the average motorist in the Cincinnati area $727 annually in additional vehicle operating costs as a result of driving on rough roads. In the Cleveland and Akron area, the report finds that 35% of major roads have pavements in poor condition, and 22% are in mediocre condition, costing the average motorist in the region $763 annually in additional vehicle operating costs as a result of driving on rough roads. The report finds that in the Columbus area, 20% of major roads have pavements in poor condition and 20% are in mediocre condition, costing the average motorist $534 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads. In the Dayton area, the report finds that 28% of major roads are in poor condition and 27% are rated in mediocre condition, with costing the average motorist in the region $675 in additional vehicle operating costs as a result of driving on rough roads. In the Toledo area, the report finds that 24% of major roads have pavements rated in poor condition and 19% are rated in mediocre condition, costing the average motorist in the region $567 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads. The report also notes that 5% of Ohio's bridges are rated in poor condition and 34% are rated in fair condition. The bridge in poor condition are safe to travel, otherwise it would be posted to restrict it to lower weight vehicles. But the inspections which are conducted on most bridges every 2 years have indicated that significant repairs are needed. And on the bridges rated in fair condition, ongoing maintenance is needed to keep those bridges from falling into poor condition. We also looked at the reliability of major roadways and highways in the state and found that the cost of traffic congestion to the motorists and also to truckers is $5 billion annually as a result of lost time and wasted fuel. I'm going to go ahead and break the congestion data down for the state's top urban areas. In the Cincinnati area, TRIP estimates that each year the average motorist is spending an additional 48 hours annually stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion, wasting 24 gallons of fuel, costing the average motorist in the Cincinnati area $1,157 annually as a result of traffic congestion. In the Cleveland and Akron area, TRIP estimates that the average motorist is spending an additional 40 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting 21 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion, costing the average motorist $938 annually as a result of traffic congestion. In the Columbus area, TRIP estimates that each year the average motorist is wasting 46 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting 20 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion, costing the average motorist $1,099 annually due to traffic congestion. In the Dayton area, TRIP estimates that each year the average area motorist is spending 30 hours annually stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion and wasting 12 gallons of fuel, costing the average commuter in the region $627 annually. In the Toledo area, TRIP estimates that each year the average motorist is spending 37 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting 20 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion, costing the average motorist $789 annually due to traffic congestion. The TRIP report also looked at traffic safety in the report also includes a list of the most congested routes in the state and during peak hours, during peak commuting hours. And the report lists portions of those major highways in some of the largest urban areas in Ohio, including Akron, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus. The report also took a look at traffic fatalities, traffic safety. Unfortunately, what we've seen across the country also has occurred in Ohio, which was a significant increase in traffic fatalities. And largely, we saw this increase really coincide with the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. From 2018 to 2022, there were 6,080 traffic fatalities in Ohio. 14% of those were of bicyclists and pedestrians. Nationwide, what we saw in Ohio from 2019 to 2022 was an 11% increase in traffic fatalities and a 25% increase in the actual rate of traffic fatalities per 100 million miles of travel. We did see, as you'll see in the report, in 2022, those numbers dropped slightly. But again, the number of traffic fatalities is really unacceptable. And it's critical moving forward that Ohio takes every step that they can take to reduce those number of traffic fatalities. The Department of Transportation has put out an excellent strategy for addressing traffic safety, which really has a 5-point set of solutions, including safer drivers traveling at safer speeds, safer vehicles, and most critically, or very critical from our perspective, is improved roadway safety features. Everything from rumble strips to good lane markings, to paved shoulders, to good intersection design. All of those cost-effective strategies are very critical. Finally, the report points out that each year, $1.1 trillion of goods are shipped to and from sites in Ohio. The state's highways carry the largest share of that travel. And as the report points out, that by 2050, the value adjusted for inflation of freight moved in Ohio is going to increase by 98% and by weight by 42%. And the report includes a list of the state's 10 worst freight bottlenecks, including portions of Interstate 70, 71, 75, 80, and 275. So I'll conclude there, pointing out that Ohio continues to make significant progress in improving its transportation system to keep people safer in Ohio, keep the system more reliable. But between inflation and a return of a significant vehicle travel, the state will face challenges in the future in continuing to address those needs. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris for your comments.
Good morning, everyone, and we really appreciate you for joining us for this trip report rollout. As Rocky mentioned, my name is Chris Runyon, that's R-U-N-Y-A-N, and I am the president of the Ohio Contractors Association and a member of the Fix Our Roads Ohio Coalition. OCA is a trade association that represents contractors who perform transportation, utility, and site development construction services, and others who provide materials and other needed services for the construction industry. We have 200 contractor members here at OCA statewide and another 275 members that support those contractors. This association was established in 1918 and serves as the collective voice for the heavy highway construction industry in Ohio. I'm sure the importance of safe, efficient, well-maintained highway transportation system is not lost on any of you. What was initially constructed, expanded upon, and maintained since the first Native American trails crisscrossed Ohio is now what every citizen of this state relies on each day to get to work and to play and receive nearly every necessity of living their lives, or to have those necessities delivered to them or to the businesses where they shop. A report by the American Road and Transportation Builders Association found that the design, construction, and maintenance of the highway system in Ohio supports nearly 132,000 full-time jobs. 66,000 of those jobs are directly related to construction and construction-related services. In addition, there are approximately 2.4 million full-time jobs in Ohio in key industries like tourism, retail sales, agriculture, manufacturing, and logistics that are dependent on the quality, safety, and reliability of the state's transportation infrastructure network. To keep these mobility needs met, it is vital that a viable funding resources are in place to meet the needs of society that's ever growing and ever changing. Just as with any fixed asset, with use comes degradation. With new needs placed on the system, expansion is necessary. Ohio has one of the densest highway transportation networks in the nation, and it has generally been well maintained. And it's gratifying to see what is being done with revenue increases that were initiated by the DeWine administration and approved by the legislature early in the governor's first term, and the more recent increases experienced through the federal bipartisan infrastructure law. However, as this report demonstrates, known wear and tear on the existing system and new demands which come about to address business and societal needs speak to the need to continually address how and how much those revenue sources are delivering. Vehicle fleet electrification is a good example. How will that impact the current funding obtained for the motor fuel vehicle tax? This report is not intended to answer those types of questions or to make specific recommendations. However, it highlights the needs and necessity on staying on top of the issue and encouraging the discussion based on system conditions and those other societal mandates. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Carolyn and Rocky.
Thank you, Chris. And now Carolyn will explain how we'll move forward with question and answers.
Sure. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Rocky and Chris. My name's Carolyn Kelly. I'm the Director of Communication and Research for TRIP. And as Rocky mentioned, we'll be able to do a brief Q&A with both Rocky and Chris. So if you have any questions, the way we'll handle that is that you can use either the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, or you can enter your question into the Q&A box below. While we wait for some hands to go up, one very quick data clarification. I believe when Rocky was talking about the post-COVID increase in Ohio of VMT, that number at the height of the pandemic, vehicle travel in Ohio dropped as much as 39%. That was in April of 2020. I believe Rocky had said 2%. It's now back to 2% above pre-COVID levels. So just a clarification there that the COVID drop in VMT was 39% in April of 2020, and now we're back to 2% above pre-COVID vehicle travel levels. I do see that we've got some hands up. So the way that'll work is that I will elevate those people to a panelist. So we'll be able to see you and hear you as you can ask your question live. So first, James Pilcher, I see has got a hand up. So James, I'll promote you to a panelist. And once you unmute your line, you should be able to ask your question of Rocky and Chris. All right, James, you can go ahead. You'll need to unmute your line first. There we go.
Good morning. It just clicked over. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to join. James Pilcher, Local 12 News in Cincinnati. You mentioned Cincinnati has some of the highest costs for commuters. Can you specifically identify any of the specific roadways or highways that you see a great need for in Southwest Ohio in this area? I know the Brent Spence Bridge, but that's obviously a big thing in that they're going to replace that, or not replace, excuse me, build another bridge next to it. But can you identify any other specific choke points or roads that you think really need some attention?
Well, while I won't pretend to be an expert, throughout the region, the report includes, I think, a couple of lists I think are very helpful. One looks at the current significant projects being pursued in the Cincinnati area. Several interchange projects and some widenings on a few portions of the roadways there. And then right behind that, there's a list of, I believe it's 5 major projects that the state has started pre-engineering on, but the funding's not there. And if you look at them, all of them, I would anticipate, just looking at the brief descriptions, are going to have some impact on addressing reliability, addressing congestion. And then beyond that, there's also a list of what the state says has the most congested portions of their system during peak hours in the AM period, and again in the PM in the afternoon. And you'll see that in both of those lists, the Cincinnati area is prominent. So to me, that would suggest some priorities. And then finally, there's a list of the 10 greatest bottlenecks for freight, which oftentimes are analogous to bottlenecks for commuters. And again, Cincinnati with portions of I-75 and I-71 showing up at the top of the list. So, I mean, as you know, living in the area, there's some pretty significant bottlenecks in the region. Chris, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, that covers it, Rocky, well.
I mean, as a follow-up, some of these areas though are landlocked. It's not like you can build more lanes. You're looking at 75, it comes through Lockland and some of the design. There's housing and whatever, and industrial areas on either side of the highway. Any other alternatives for that as we continue to grow and as obviously freight traffic and truck traffic continues to expand?
Coming out of COVID, I mean, a lot of things changed, and one of them obviously was commuting patterns. And generally, we saw morning commutes come back afternoon commutes come back stronger, pretty much to the same levels as morning commutes, and it was a result of changing work patterns, which also impacts certainly traffic congestion or reliability. And in terms of the approach, you're right. Some corridors are essentially built out, or they're landlocked, as you said. And so you look at efficiencies in parallel routes. You look at traffic management strategies. In some cases, in terms of transit improvements can also have some impact. Although again, coming out of COVID, our commuting patterns have altered a bit. And so really improving reliability and decreasing congestion really needs a holistic approach that looks at not just that specific corridor, but other corridors along in those directions. So again, you really are taking everything in the toolbox to address reliability, particularly in corridors that you've described.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Thanks. The next question was submitted via the chat from Patty Gallagher Newberry, and she asks, does your report address anything related to the Brent Spence Bridge Corridor project? And if so, what does it say?
The reality is, yeah, we haven't gone into evaluation of the progress on that project. Obviously, if you look at nationally and certainly regionally, it is the most critical piece of infrastructure in the state. And as Kentucky and Ohio move forward, obviously the project addressing that is going to have significant impacts on really reliability for freight and for people moving through that corridor.
And I would also add to that, Rocky, that there's, the limits of the project and the impact of itself is not just the structure over the Ohio River, but there's going to be a lot of different changes to improve traffic flow in the approach roadways and further up north and into a couple of interchanges as you get further into Cincinnati and head north on 75. And as well as south of there. So You can't really think of that as just a bridge job because the limits go much, much further in both directions.
Our next question comes from Lucas DePrio. Lucas, I had tried to elevate you to a panelist, but it doesn't seem to be going through. I'll read the question. If you're able to accept the invite, you can join us to ask any follow-ups. But Lucas asks, Rocky mentioned earlier that poor road quality leads to motorists burning more fuel to go the same distance. And can you explain why that is?
When pavements deteriorate, essentially and this data is gathered by essentially running a vehicle with a monitor over paved surfaces, which measure vibrations. And while it's not an in-depth analysis of the pavement substructure, ride smoothness ultimately is a measure of the quality of that pavement. And as those numbers go up, it reflects the likelihood that that's a paved surface that needs to be at the very least resurfaced, in some cases reconstructed. So in terms of those costs, when pavements are rougher, it's for a vehicle, it has to work that much harder. So it's burning more gasoline. It's also increasing tire wear. And then the additional costs are additional routine maintenance, as you would expect when you're driving on roads that you can tell are in rough condition and they're kind of bouncing you around. It's putting more stress on the vehicle. And then ultimately, it's accelerating vehicle depreciation, which essentially means that that vehicle you've purchased is not going to last as long as you would like it. And obviously, that's a significant financial burden.
All right, I've got one other question from Dean with the Columbus Dispatch. And Dean, again, if you would like to be elevated to a panel, so you can accept the invite, but for right now, I can read the questions. So he asks, isn't fuel efficiency an environmental urgency? So please discuss the unintended consequences of reducing fossil fuel use as it relates to gas tax funding. And then he also asks, how important is rail, bus, and public transit? Does the increase here reduce many of the needs that you are discussing?
Okay, well, let's start maybe with, and Carol, I may have you to read the question again in case I've missed part of this. But certainly, the transportation world is under a mandate to move away from carbon-based energy. And so certainly there's going to be a lot of benefits to that. One obviously is traditional air pollution. As we move to electric vehicles or potentially hydrogen vehicles for maybe freight, that's certainly going to be a societal benefit. Reducing carbon obviously has significant benefits in terms of climate change. In terms of the vehicles themselves, obviously there's going to be a challenge of moving to electric vehicles, which will likely be heavier vehicles. And for freight in particular, that may have implications for the preservation of roads and bridges. There may be some safety implications, though I think a lot of that is still really, we're still learning more about that. An obvious challenge, though, is funding. At the state level, states are moving to fees on electric vehicle ownership to capture some of that lost motor fuel revenue. At the federal level, they don't have such a tool in place. And so an obvious question moving forward, well, how will the federal system be funded or its contribution to transportation be funded? So those are really, I think, the impact moving forward of moving to cleaner energy sources. What was the second part of that question? And then if I haven't caught all of that, and also, I know we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I'll be available throughout the day for one-on-one interviews, and all the contact information is on the material attached to this report. So if there's some things I haven't fully gotten to, I'm happy to continue the conversation individually with reporters. But what was the second part of that question?
Sure. The second part was, how important is rail, bus, and public transit? And does the increase here reduce some of the needs that you're discussing in the TRIP report?
Well, if you look at the list of projects that are currently moving forward, capital projects, and also the capital projects that essentially are the next set of priorities for the department, some of them include improvements to the public transit systems, in particular urban areas. And really, public transit has also seen an impact of COVID, where we've seen a change in commuting patterns. And so we're really, really with all transportation, learning post-COVID the most productive way to help with the reliability of the system. So I would say that certainly public transit has an important role to play, but it's really also unique to different urban areas, and really has to be matched up with changing commuting patterns in terms of so that really those investments are, do have as much benefit as possible.
I believe
Let me add to that also that the change in the vehicle fleet is slowly happening now, and we don't know exactly where it's going to peak out or when it's going to peak out, but we are being remiss if we are not addressing this issue now while it is a small issue, before it becomes a big issue. So, I would encourage those interested parties who have a concern about the impacts that on transportation funding, to take an active role and to begin to look at this issue and find out what some alternative funding solutions might be, that would assure a good quality system as we move into the future, with potentially a completely different kind of vehicle that may dominate the fleet.
Thank you, Chris. Carolyn, are there any other questions?
that covers all the questions in the queue at the moment.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's news conference. Again, thanks for everyone who took time to participate in the call. And as I said, certainly Trip will be available throughout the day for additional interviews. Feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, and I hope everyone has a good day.